because I personally think a leader is not just someone who excels in a business, but excels in life in general. They're focused on giving back to their community because they know that life is short, and it's about what you're going to be remembered by.
Welcome to the Sales Problem Podcast. Here is the problem we are trying to solve. Every year you hit the reset button and you have to beat your numbers and grow your business. You have to get quicker, faster, and better. We are two guys trying to solve that sales problem, trying to help you grow by enhancing what you know about the art and science of selling and personal development. Along the way, we're going to interview some interesting characters and debate some different angles about this common business problem. So thanks for joining us. Let's get growing.
Welcome back to the Sales Problem Podcast. It's Season 2, Episode 3. I'm Steve Comerford with my co-host Daniel Burns. Happy-go-lucky, hair perfectly coiffed, always charming. Dan, how you doing and what are you brewing?
Oh, Steve, I'm so glad you mentioned the hair. Thanks for throwing that in, because there are going to be some people that are watching and not just listening. But what am I brewing today, Steve? I've got Kick-Ass coffee. It's by Kicking Horse, which is a West Coast company out of BC. And there's two reasons, Steve, I chose this coffee for today's episode and for our listeners. The first reason is, come on. This podcast is all about waking up in the morning, grabbing your coffee, and going out and kicking some ass.
Kicking ass.
So I think that's what we want salespeople to do. But the marketing department, Steve, they reeled me in with this slogan on their coffee. It says, something worth doing is worth dreaming big. I'm going to say that again. Something worth doing is worth dreaming big. And last episode, we had Alvin Brown on. We talked about you can't dream big enough. So the marketing on the package got me, took me right to the register. I gave them my money. But the coffee itself, Steve, is really good. It's sweet. It's smoky. It is bold. And again, the marketing department throws on, it's audacious. Come on. That got me again. Great
Nice.
job, guys, in the marketing department. I'm giving this one, Steve, 4.5 beans out of 5. And let me tell you the breakdown. 4 for the taste of the coffee, because it's fantastic. But I'm giving 0.5 just to the marketing department. That's all yours, guys. Great job at Kicking Horse Coffee. So, Steve, today we're going to be solving 99 sales problems, but I know that your coffee isn't one of them. So what are you brewing? What do you got in your cup, brother?
I'd call you smoky, right? Was it bold and smoky, Dan? That was you?
Bold and smoky, yeah.
Yes.
Audacious, too.
Nicely done. I like the message. I could see how that pulled you in on the dream big aspect of it. But I went a little different. You've lived a summer of forest fires and floods. The environment's a big thing. I ran into 1.21 roasters, and they brew sustainable, environmentally friendly coffee beans right here in Burlington, Ontario.
Ooh.
I also got this one because it's Great Scott. And as you know, my wife, her last name is Scott, so I had to pick that one up just to do that. But it's a Robusto. It's a Robusto espresso blend. Hazelnut, cocoa, and a bold body, just like somebody else. Not me, somebody else.
Be careful there. We're going to link everybody to those coffees in the show notes.
Yes. And I'm with you. I'd give it a 4.5 out of 5 too. 4 for the taste. Nice, light, kind of gets you going for the day, gets you up and running. And then the 0.5 for, I think, looking at environmentally friendly and good, conscious companies that bring that to the forefront, I think is key this day and age for sure.
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, enough about the coffee, Dan. You ready? I'm
Let's
ready.
go.
Let's
Season
go.
2, baby.
Yes. So I'm really excited about our guest today, David Elie. And here's why he's on the podcast. What is probably the main reason people are in sales? Big question mark? Well, 5 out of 4 doctors, dentists, and practitioners would say money and financial freedom is one of the keys, right? So not only does David do that in his day-to-day business, but he's also looking to build a legacy through real estate developments and showing others how to do it as well. David is the president and CEO of Elite Class Developments, a multi-award winning real estate broker, a builder, developer, and an investor. And I'd also add in there a mentor, and we'll get to that too. And guess what? He used to sell copiers with me back in the day. So we all three of us have a little connection to the toner world. But he's also interesting enough over the last couple of years. He's also co-authored a book called The Supreme Leadership 7-Figure Minds: How to Grow and Lead a 7-Figure Business. It explores the mental fortitude, wherewithal, and know-how that separates the weekend warriors from the die-hard entrepreneurs. So please give me a warm welcome. Help me give me a warm welcome to David Elie. David, how are you feeling right now? And give our listeners a little version of who you are and how you've become a successful real estate broker and developer.
Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen, for having me on the show. My journey has been quite the unique one, coming from the days of Canon
Yes.
to where we are today. Absolutely. Those are, those stepping stones that truly allow you to appreciate where you've come from. So I appreciate you bringing that one to the forefront. Those days were pivotal. They were part of my journey. I started off in the private equity world about 15 years ago. While we were actually still at Canon, I was building my business and putting in the work early, along with my partners at the Rhino Equity Group, we started something truly special. Focusing on home improvement manufacturing and acquiring companies that would essentially be the cornerstone for how I do my business today. We expanded that business, and ultimately that gave us the ability to allow me to step out into building my personal brand in the development space. So for Elite Class, we started Elite Class about 7 years ago. From there we've built custom homes and evolved that company to a multifamily development firm operating out of Stouffville, Ontario, and operating also out of Dallas, Texas. So a lot of great wins and learning experiences in that experience for sure.
Excellent. So this podcast, David, it's all about growth. So it sounds like you took a side hustle and you've just kept growing and growing and growing. And I mean, that's what our listeners really want, is to try to create growth. So I want to jump right into a new section of our podcast for season 2. This is the chance to just drop the mic and give our listeners some of the great stuff that you've learned in that journey. And you can tell we're amped up here, Dave. We've got too much caffeine probably in our system. So we want to just jump straight to the good stuff. Tell our listeners, what's the ingredients in your recipe for success to this point? The key things that have been part of your journey that have led you to such success.
Absolutely, guys. I'd say one of the key ingredients was mental fortitude. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get to the top of any chain unless you're willing to put in that work, understanding you're going to get knocked down, but you fall forward every time you do take one of those situations on. And those are life learning experiences that, you can't put a price tag on. When I originally got into the business of private equity, we went in there blind. We've never been in that space. It was a unique space. We had to cut our teeth. We had to learn. We had to pay to play. And sometimes those are expensive lessons to learn by, but that really does allow you to appreciate what it takes to get there. We purchased our first company back then, and we knew we were good at what we did. Sales was something I've always been exceptional at, But when you're starting to wrap your head around a different industry like manufacturing and understanding the challenges and all those obstacles that you'll run into in acquiring different scale and different size manufacturing businesses, it really does give you an appreciation. It humbles you, knowing that you really are a small fish in a big pond. And, when I came out of Canon being one of the top sales reps over there, I knew I was good at it, but I didn't realize how vast the world would be when I got out of there. So those were critical in my learning experience for sure.
Wow. I mean, 3 copier guys on the call right now. I think what I'm hearing too is that sales is a great base for people, throughout business, throughout their careers. If you've got sales as a base, there's a lot of different things that you can jump to. And I heard some great things. There's so much packed into that, Dave. I mean, the mental fortitude is a good takeaway for our listeners. Fall forward, pay to play. David, our listeners, some of them are at the point right now where they're trying to finish this year really big. But there's a common thing we've heard from a lot of salespeople that, well, I don't want to have too much success because I'm going to have to then repeat that the next year. There's no way I'm going to be able to write that much next year. So I'm going to set myself up. They're almost scared of their own success or scared of raising the bar. Can you comment on that? Any advice for people who are trying to kind of, get to the next level, but are a bit afraid of their own success?
Yeah, I think, it's the fear of the unknown, right? We don't know what's coming, especially in this world that we're living in. There's so many things happening around us that a lot of noise that affects, where your mind is and how you're envisioning the future. One of the biggest things that I've always passed on to my teams is consistency. Doing the activities, because sure, you don't want to, set yourself up for a bigger target in the future. But if you're being consistent with those activities, you're making those calls, you're putting yourself in the right environments, the consistency will follow you. Right. And that was one of the things that I did is I've always, time blocked myself, making sure that I'm making the time for those, critical activities that are going to allow my business to be consistent. I think with a lot of sales individuals, we look at that sales cycle, right? We start the process, we're following up with leads, we're doing all the right activities, and we start making good money. And summer rolls around and we're like, I need a vacation. I've earned it. And then ultimately you take your foot off the gas, you stop doing those activities, and then you get back from vacation and you're like, what, I need more money. I got to keep going. So I got to get back on the horse. And so one thing that I've always focused on is being consistent, constantly setting that time blocking that time to follow up and do those activities on a consistent basis. And I think if you follow that recipe, you're going to be able to always exceed your targets because you're building a strong base.
Dave, I think you nailed it right there. I think part of a high-performing mindset is consistency. It's not the expectation you're just going to do it one year and it's going to be a fluke. You're going to be the type of person that shows up year over year consistently with those great results. And time blocking, that's a great takeaway for me.
I like this too, Dan, because of the people that we have interviewed, right? Mindset is like common every conversation we have. That proper mindset and being in the right space is perfect. And then last, consistency was one of the 4 C's that we talked with Alvin about, right? In terms of building that growth and having that success, and consistency was the one of the 4 C's. So I think you hit it right on the nail, David.
Thank you, buddy.
Or was it the nail on the head? Yes. Okay. So you're better at those things than me, Dan. The one question I have that kind of follows Dan's questioning there, David, is I feel that you're part of a team, or you like to develop that team. How does that fit into your success and building the right team and having the right people alongside you?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. Reason being is we can only be so good at everything. I've always been a firm believer in specializing, understanding, the full capacity of one specific area. And so when you're doing something of that nature, you want to make sure you're surrounding yourself with others who are experts in their industries that are going to fill the gaps in your lack of understanding. I'm a sales guy, I'm a business guy. I went to business school, but I wasn't a finance guy. And so when I was looking at building my company, I wasn't a manufacturing guy. So I made sure that I surrounded myself with the best of the best in those industries that some of the guys I've worked with in the past in different industries, and I knew how good they were, and I knew that they kind of supplemented who I was, and that's why we always worked really well together. So with that experience, I brought those individuals into the organization. I really did take a step back to assess and be truthful with myself to say, okay, this is what I can bring to the table. I'm going to be consistent with bringing that to the table every day, but I need individuals within the different realms to bring that consistency in their areas. And that's how we built such a strong organization.
Nice. I like that. I think in today's world, you can't really go it alone, and you can't be everything to everybody. You really need that people, a strong team around you. But let's shift gears just a touch, and we'll go over to the book, that Supreme Leadership and that 7-Figure Mind. So again, we talked about where you focus on what separates the weekend warrior from the diehard entrepreneur. So in today's selling world, how do you get to that level of success? And what was it like being, authoring a book and sharing that advice out to the world?
Yeah, it's been a journey. One thing that I've learned over the years is you have to bet on yourself. I work for all these, global luxury brands over the years, and I made them a lot of money. But I was always apprehensive about, taking the risk, stepping out into the business world on my own. I knew I had the pedigree because I've done it and I've repeated it consistently. But it's always that fear of the unknown. That we operate with blinders. We can only see so far, and we can only, control those controllables. So for me, when I started, venturing into the business realm, I said, okay, I'm going to take a risk. And it was Canon was kind of that springboard for me. That was the last time I worked for a corporation. That's when I kind of took the chance, and we did definitely hedge against the risks. We built the business in a way that it could support our stepping out into those realms and still supporting the income stream, dollars that I wanted to be consistently making. But it came to a point where I had to say, okay, it's time. I'm just going to do this, and I'm not going to look back. And that was probably one of the best decisions I ever did. You can't look back. There's always the would have, could have, should haves. And obviously I've learned a lot down that path. But by always focusing on what's ahead of me has really allowed me to fine tune what I want to be and what I want to bring to the table. And so, tying that into my book, I focused on, when you start off, sure, it's a weekend gig, it's a hustle. I'm putting in the time, evenings, weekends, for probably about 5 years, 6 years. I was working 2 full-time jobs. I was grinding. Luckily, I have a very supportive wife. I didn't have the obligations of children at that time, so I was able to put that effort and that time in to set myself up. And so I focus on that in the book. And, I have to be able to, one, make the right decisions, take the right risks, but mitigating those risks, it was a critical path item until I was able to say, okay, I'm doing this full time. I'm putting my full effort into it. And once I did that and realized that it wasn't as scary as it was in my mind, I was really able to take the world by storm and really start to build that legacy that I kind of envisioned.
So it sounds like a key part of that is just the courage to step out and not look back. One key thing I learned from Canon as well was make a decision and go forward. Like don't be second guessing yourself, and don't be ruminating on you said, right, woulda, coulda, shoulda. It's like, no, step out, make the decision, and learn from it and move on. So key, that was excellent. Thank you. Dan, it looked like you were going to step out and say something.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to come back to something that you said, Dave, because I think it's one of the best things has been said on our podcast, but it kind of got buried a little bit because you were talking about strengths and weaknesses, identifying the things in yourself that you had, maybe some things that you weren't quite as strong at. And I think self-awareness for our listeners, that kind of self-awareness is so important. Knowing what your strengths are and saying, okay, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to go forward on this, but also, putting your ego aside and being able to say, hey, there's some things, manufacturing or finance or some things, I'm not going to be the best person. And I need to build that team around me in order to create success. I think there's a lot of salespeople that have resources around them. And I want to just encourage them to use all those resources for things that maybe they're not the best at everything, but they want to focus on what they're great at and get to that level of success.
Absolutely. Well, you nailed it, man. You're only as strong as the tools that you use, and that goes into construction, right? If you don't have the right tools, you can only build such a level of product, right? And so for me, I've always focused on buying the quality tools and surrounding myself with quality people, because you're going to be a byproduct of that environment.
I love it.
So, on that note, Dave, in the book as well, you talk about leading a 7-figure business, and I want to move over to more of the leadership and kind of you're running that structure. Are there a few key points that you'd like to bring out and share with how to lead people? What was effective for you? What worked, and maybe what you, as you said, you were humbled along the way. What some challenges were, and what you've learned from that too in leading people.
Absolutely. For me, and I talk about it in the book, is trusting in your people, right? Your people are your strongest and greatest strength in business. Sometimes you'll make a great hire decision, and sometimes you're going to make the wrong hire decision. But ultimately, that's going to create some great awareness of gaps that exist. Right. And so that's something that I've learned along the path. I brought on some incredible individuals that really helped me to elevate the brand and elevate who we are as an organization. I've hired some not so great individuals who, once they're into their role, complacency kicks in. The lack of I guess, follow up to some degree, because I always try to give my people the benefit of the doubt, give them the rope to essentially hang themselves by, but also to climb and grow, right? And I think that is a critical path item. People usually, once they're given an opportunity, if they're the right type of person, they're gonna take it and they're gonna run with it. But it's also going to expose when the wrong person is given that same opportunity. They're really going to choke out and not be able to perform at the level that they forecasted that they could.
So I heard in there a lot of trust, a lot of openness to let them kind of grow and kind of flourish on their own, I guess, with your advice. But also a key awareness of where things aren't really working properly or well, and acting, I would say, quickly on making sure that you make those changes in the proper manner.
Absolutely. Yeah, pivoting, being agile as a PM. These are fundamentals of how we operate in the project management space. So being able to make a quick decision, evaluate those decisions, make a quick move to correct that situation if need be, and then obviously documenting those lessons learned so that you don't repeat those same activities ever again. Yeah,
I like the position of making a quick decision and moving on. Too often I find, and you're, an entrepreneur and you're building these businesses, but on the corporate side, there's too many waffling, well, I don't know if I should make that decision or not. No, just let's go. Let's just go and move forward. So excellent points.
So I'm going to stay on the topic of leadership, Dave, but I want to go a little bit outside the box because I was excited when you were coming on and I was looking at your background, your unique set of skills. So I want to throw this analogy that I've got to see whether or not it makes any sense to you, and if it ends up, kind of bringing out some good things for our listeners. But it's around building a leader. And I think building a leader is kind of like building a house or building an office. Leaders have to be made of the right materials. And the first one that comes to mind is strength. If you're in a leadership position, you just need to be strong. And if I think of materials for building, I think of, concrete or stone or brick or steel, kind of some of those traditional things. But at the same time, those materials are pretty rigid. They're not flexible. And I wonder, today's modern leader, thinking about, with all the new types of materials we have too, how leaders can become more dynamic. So I think of like a material like bamboo. It's super strong, but it's strong because it's flexible. And leaders also have to, I think nowadays too, have a soft side. It's not all about just strength. We're hearing more about emotional intelligence. We're hearing more about leaders needing to have the qualities of, compassion and vulnerability, and to be able to coach people. So thinking about materials and building a leader, with your background, what would you say are kind of some of the perfect materials or the perfect qualities if you were to build your ideal leader?
Yeah, that's a great question, buddy. I have to say that really makes you think, because this environment is quite a unique one. People in general are a lot more sensitive to how they operate in business. There's a lot of expectations without actions. And so a leader has to be very, very unique at what they do. They have to be disciplined. They have to understand the internal motivators. They have to understand, I always like to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, understanding what's going to get results out of each unique individual, and understanding where they fall in their personal development, and how to nourish that. So that's something that I've always focused on. But you know what? There is a foundation that has to be there. There has to be drive. Somebody who wants more for themselves. They want to build something unique and special and truly impact the business and their communities that surround them. Because I personally think a leader is not just someone who excels in a business, but excels in life in general. They're focused on giving back to their community because they know that life is short, and it's about what you're going to be remembered by. The legacy piece that always stays front of mind for me. Over the last few years, I've been through some pretty close call experiences, which really painted a reality for me that life is short, and you got to really think from a bigger perspective on what you want to be remembered by. So somebody who's coming into a leadership role has that awareness, and they're able to say, okay, yeah, I'm gonna give leeway in this area because I understand that this is going to allow that individual to kind of evolve if they have that opportunity. So I'd say those are some critical path items that I always look for when I'm looking for a strong leader. But again, it's somebody who's adaptable, who's you can mentor, who's they have the ability to learn and listen. That listen piece is something that always gets missed. They come on with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They think they've already conquered the world. But there's just so much more to learn.
I think that's just a fantastic insight, and I tend to agree with you. And the point I want to highlight, because our podcast is for sales people, and in the very first episode, we distinguished their sales, but we can't forget that we're all people. And to be successful in your sales, but not be successful as a person with your health, with your home life, with everything else going on, I think leaders need to kind of remember the fact that we are all people and there's success outside of work as well. So I heard some great ingredients in how to build the perfect leader: being a mentor, being adaptable, discipline, listening, having a foundation of drive, and being able to bring out that motivator that's in each person. So, Dave, I want to transition to something you brought up earlier, because when you talked about hiring, I thought, oh, God, you know what? I've made some really bad hires. I've had some failures. I've had some ones where I go, what was I thinking? How did, how did I think this was going to be a fit? And things flamed out pretty quickly. But we love failure on this podcast. So tell our listeners about a time where, you thought you were going to have success, but it just didn't go the way you wanted it to. You thought you might get the sale, but nope, everything kind of didn't line up the way you thought it would, and what you kind of learned in that process.
Yeah, for sure. And failure is a growth opportunity, right? And I think that's what you consistently nail on the podcast, and I love it, guys. And so for me, there's been lots of learning opportunities or failures, if you want to peg it, throughout my career. From previous roles, I learned you can't trust everybody. When I was transitioning out of Canon, I was excited about the next steps that I was about to take, and I shared information with individuals that ended up providing that information untimely. And so it makes you have to make different decisions that you didn't plan for. Even moving forward into the private equity side, where again there was a lot of gaps in our understanding. So we moved forward with trust. And you learn you can't trust everybody in business, especially when you're buying somebody's company. That their internal motivators are different than your internal motivators, and their goal is to sell that company, and that's sales 101, right? And they're going to promote the best components of it. And so obviously in our first transaction, that's where we probably had the most learnings. Luckily, it was a smaller company, so your impacts are smaller and manageable. And those were some great pivotal lessons for us to learn as we moved into some larger transactions, where if we made those same mistakes and made those same challenges, we'd be falling backwards, not falling forward. And then even moving it even forward, thinking about on the development side, there's been projects where we go in and we're excited for the nature of the project, and you go down that process, you start the entitlement process, you're working with the municipalities, and you're midway through, and all of a sudden their needs and their desires for what your project look like change, and some new risks are established, and you have to make that critical decision. What's in the best interest for the business long term? Taking this opportunity to win now will ultimately have greater and lasting implications long term, that would potentially cripple the business. So I'd say I've had lots. That's how I've grown. Right? You can't grow unless you fall. And I've always found that once you're about to break through a new threshold, that's when it gets hardest, right? And that's where it becomes the most challenging. And it's that mental fortitude of knowing that there's light on that other side of that tunnel, and that you're close, you're almost there, and that you just need to continue pushing and driving forward, is really what has kind of got me over that hump and into that new echelon.
Steve, I just found the little clip that we're going to put at the front of the podcast where Dave says failure is a growth opportunity. Boom. There it is.
Exclamation point. Drop the mic. I like the fact about understanding people and what drives them. I love that comment, Dave. So I'm going to ask you, what are you up to these days? What's driving you? What can you share with listeners on either how to get a hold of you, or how to engage in what you're up to and helping them be successful?
Absolutely. So we have a lot of initiatives that we're currently pushing forward right now. One being, we have a great program called Developer Academy, and I'm so passionate and so excited about it because it really gave me the platform to work with incredible individuals who have great pedigree, who are industry experts in their own right. Whether they're real estate brokers, agents, they're real estate flippers, and they're just struggling on breaking into that next echelon of real estate development. right? The reality is there isn't a program, there isn't a course that was available to me to say, okay, this is how you go about doing real estate development, right? It's a very closed market. It's an old boys club. And a lot of the individuals that play in this space, they keep it close. They keep their cards close to their chest because it's a great industry, and there's a lot of opportunity to make a lot of money in this industry. But for me, again, touching back on some of life experiences that have really grounded me in understanding that it's not just about me. It's about that legacy and what you can do for the people that are within your community that surround you. This is one of the best platforms that I could have thought of, where I can mentor, share, and develop individuals, incredible individuals that just needed that extra push. They needed to understand some of these core competencies of real estate developing that just isn't available to the average individual. That's going to really allow them to create a generational wealth for their families, for the people that they surround themselves, meeting the needs of, the world markets where we have such a huge shortage of homes, affordable homes. A lot of the students that are within that program are focused on making those differences. So that's an incredible program. You can find us on eliteclassdev.com. Check out the Developer Academy link there, and you'll see a lot more about what that program is all about, the curriculum, and how we're planning on bringing that to market. It starts this September. Actually, it starts on Monday, so it's a perfect timing to be talking about it. But it's definitely an incredible program. We have some awesome development sites coming up right now. We're actually going to market with one of our projects here in Stouffville. It's a luxury townhouse and semi project just here in town. I've been working on this one for about 3 years now, so it's really exciting to be able to bring that to fruition. We're making some big moves on the real estate brokerage side as well. We're really building our team of agents to be able to support the growing opportunity in the developing space and being able to sell these projects out and bring people home to their next phase of life, right?
Nice. I think a good tie-in with the people that we've talked to. I love the learning. I love the education piece. I love the giving back and sharing and building a better community. And I love your part around creating a legacy. You have to kind of step back sometimes and look at the broader picture. And it's fantastic that you're doing those types of things. Come a long way from the copier world. So very, very impressive, David. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve.
Dan, any closing comments? Anything you'd like to add? Or
yeah, I love what you're saying, Dave. I think what I'm hearing too is you're somebody who's achieved a lot, and this last piece sounds like your contribution that you're now kind of paying it forward to, taking all the things that you know and helping other people develop themselves, and I love that. So you dropped so many great bits of info in this podcast. So fantastic. Excited to have you on and everything that you gave to us. And I'm hoping that this podcast, we get to 7-figure podcast. Steve, what do you think? I think that's what we're going to build to, right?
What was the quote on the coffee? Got to dream.
Yeah.
Redo the quote again.
It's worth dreaming big.
It's worth dreaming big. Nice. Yeah. Well, David, we want to thank you. Really nice to share your thoughts and how to have that growth mindset. You kind of hit that right off the get-go in terms of having that strong mental acuity between your ears on what you need to do to be successful. And that's part of our mission here with the Great Canadian Growth Guys. So you gave our listeners lots to think about, a lot of knowledge, a lot of sharing on how to thrive and succeed. So, and you've helped them grow by enhancing what they know. So listeners, we love you. We appreciate you right from the bottom of our hearts. Thanks for listening. Hope you've learned. Our promise is to give you 1 or 2 nuggets that you can use tomorrow. And I think David definitely delivered on those ideas. So really appreciate you listening. Please share it with a friend. Like us, subscribe, and provide us some advice on where we can kind of take this podcast to a different level and provide you some value back in what you do every day. So we'll see you on our next episode. Until then, keep building the best version of you.